Hello. And then on.
Level check, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm about an inch away from the mic, which is ideal.
Test. Is that all right? I speak loudly.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the meeting. If we can make a start. Turn the mic on, yeah? It is on. Off. All right. Yeah. First of all, I'll be reading out the protocol. Apologies for absence minutes. And then my announcements, I want to address the group that's over here in support of Saving Teignmouth Hospital. So we'll start by reading out the protocol. No fire alarm test is planned should the fire alarm sound. Please leave the room and meet by the stand at the far end of the car park. Please raise your hand if you wish to speak, and a boom microphone will be brought over to you. If you don't speak into the microphone, you will not be heard on the live stream otherwise. Please remain seated. Please keep points short, and I ask that members not to repeat the points that are already been raised. Voting will be by a show of hands, and should the meeting be adjourned, any filming must cease unless the express permission from those being filmed has been obtained. During any adjournment, I would ask that members, the public and officers, please leave the room until the meeting reconvenes. Right. Item 1 for the meeting is apologies for absence. May I have that, please, Sarah?
Have apologies from Councillors Cook, Hayes, Foden, Nuttall, Gribble, Thorne, Jenks, Eden and Toome, and apologies from the Managing Director.
Thank you very much, Sarah. We move to item 2, which is the minutes of the meetings on the 17th of November and the 29th of November. May I have a proposer for those minutes? Happy to propose it. Seconded by Councillor Dewhurst. All right, can I have a show of hands, please, to accept those minutes? Okay, it looks as though it'll be carried. Those against those minutes, anything wrong? Anybody abstaining from those minutes? You usually get 3 people at the back. Thank you very much. The minutes are carried. Thank you very much. So I move to item 3, announcements. I'd like to welcome in the announcements here the group that has turned out in the rain in support of trying to retain Teignbridge Hospital. Their motion, unfortunately, put forward by David Cox, is way down the agenda, and we've got an almighty amount of business to consume before that, and the officers and the councillors have asked me to stick to the running order. We're not ducking out of this. You can watch the whole meeting live on YouTube when you go home later. The executive, incidentally, are mindful to support this motion, in which case it comes back to full council if it goes to that. If we have a debate later on in the day, we're going to need 2/3 of members to support that debate, to debate it here and there, which will be later on. But we can't really afford the time with the local plan today on the agenda. This local plan is, for the benefit of the public, is to consider another 4,530 new homes in the whole of Teignbridge up till 2040, building at a rate of 741 homes a year. So somebody kindly from the hospital group stood up and looked at me very hard and said, well, surely we're going to need this hospital open to cater for all these new homes, and he certainly has a valid point. So all I would like to say is thank you very much to the group for coming. It's not rude to disappear. If you want to hear some of this debate on the rest of things, we've all brought sandwiches here as councillors today, and we're expecting this to be an almighty long meeting. Those of you that might remember, I did chair the local plan meeting in 2012, and we were here till 10 to 6 in the evening with umpteen breaks. And I propose to have breaks this morning, comfort breaks at a suitable point. We're having a break for lunch and coming back as the meeting goes on throughout the day. So it's not going to be one of those almighty long meetings. So I hope the group are satisfied with what I've said to them over there. And once again, thank you for turning out. The press have got all the photos they need, etc., etc. So I think you've made your point very, very well, and thank you for turning out. Right, if I may move on, please, to the next item, which is public questions. Item 5, there are no...
Chair, we have declarations
I've skipped one. I'm awfully sorry after my announcement. Yeah, very good. Item 4 is declarations of interest. Right, Councillor Sally Morgan.
I'm just going to declare a personal interest on an aspect of the local plan. It's an aspect that I have been involved in as a campaigner It's not a pecuniary interest, so I will stay and debate and vote on the item. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other declarations of interest? No. Thank you very much indeed. All right, we move to public questions, item 5, and I believe
There are no public
there are no
questions.
public questions. That's what I thought. Which gets us straight away on to item 6, which is the council tax base for 2023/24, and the executive member for corporate services I'm looking at now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, setting the council tax base is a statutory responsibility of this council. The council tax base is the estimate number of Band D equivalent properties in the district for the next year, less a small allowance for likely collection losses. The details are shown in section 1 of Appendix A. The council tax for each of the district council, county, fire, police and town and parishes multiplied by the council tax base gives the income or the precept which the district pays to each authority. We, the district council, are responsible for collecting those taxes. I would like to thank our Chief Financial Officer, Martin Flintcroft, and his team for all the work on this. So I propose, Mr. Chairman, that the council approve the council tax base of 50,215 for the 2023-24 at Appendix A of the report. Thank you.
That's proposed by Councillor King and seconded by Councillor Connett. Have you got that, Sarah?
Yeah.
Well done. Well done. I'm now opening this up to debate. Are there any members that wish to speak on it before we go to the recommendation? Right, so the recommendation is, as it says, that the council resolve to approve the council tax base of 50,215 for the 23-24 at Appendix A of the agenda report. All those in favour, please. Those against, please, obviously. Those abstaining. Okay, so that is carried. Thank you very much indeed, members. It's always pleased to know I'm managing to push things along. Right, so it's now on to item 7, pages 23 to 142. Recommendation from the executive about the 2022 council tax reduction scheme, and I'm looking at Councillor Keeling to introduce it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I won't keep you too long on this. We are now in the 3rd year of running our income-based council tax reduction scheme, ensuring low-income working households can quickly and easily apply to help towards their council tax bills. For the vast majority of claimants, those receiving universal credit, this is a new income-banded approach which provides continuality and stability, maintaining constant levels of support despite small amounts fluctuating in their income. Our scheme continues to provide support up to a maximum of 100%, providing relief for payments of council tax for those on the lowest incomes in our community. Teignbridge remains committed to helping our most financially vulnerable households and has maintained maximum support at 100% ever since the scheme was localised. Although still higher than before the pandemic, which we saw a significant increase in the caseload, the cost of the scheme has now started to reduce. With the UK looking like we might enter recession, costs may again start to rise, but with residents still recovering from the economic impacts of the pandemic and now dealing with the cost of living crisis. I feel now is not the time to be cutting the support. We need to step up. With that in mind, I am proposing we carry forward the scheme unchanged into 23-24, providing our lowest income households with financial stability and certainty as we move forward in these challenging times. Mr Chairman, colleagues, I have looked carefully at the working age council tax reduction and exemption hardship case studies, and it is clear to me that we are helping those residents who find themselves in a situation where if they did not have the 100% safety net, families would get deeper into financial debt with the cost of collection to this council. In effect, we support and request an appropriate advice to enable the customers to make changes to their budgeting. I'm also proposing that we inbuild provision within the scheme to protect claimants from losing support as a result of the annual increase in national benefits. Since this report was prepared, the government has confirmed it will uplift primary benefits by the rate of CPI, as at the end of September. The income-banded thresholds will need to be raised accordingly to ensure no one in receipt of state benefits suffers a drop in council tax support as a direct result of the annual cost of living increase in their benefits. I would like to thank the Service Lead for Revenue and Benefits and Customer Support, Tracy Hooper, and her team for their hard work on this. So therefore, Mr Chairman, I propose that the council tax reduction scheme attached in Appendix A be adopted for the year 2023-24 with income amounts updated in line with an annual up rating in primary benefits. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
Proposed and seconded, Sarah, got that all right? Right, before we go to the vote, does anybody wish to speak on this item? Yes, there is. Councillor Cox.
Just want to congratulate Councillor Keeling on keeping this scheme going. It's really important to people. Citizens Advice Bureau tell me that council tax debt across Devon is worse now than the old payday loans, which have thankfully ended. So it's really good that we are doing this. I think we're one of only 22 councils in the entire country that does this, though I do understand the by-election in North Devon has changed control of North Devon District Council, and they intend to introduce such a scheme as ours. So I think we should be very proud of what we're doing to help the very poorest in our community by taking away the council tax liability.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Anybody else like to speak on the item at all? Right, well, you heard the recommendation just read out a second ago. Don't need me to read it out again. All those in favour of the recommendation? Okay. Those against? Any abstentions? Unanimous, Sarah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, we move on from that one to item 8. Recommendation from the Executive of the 3rd of January, re-council tax premiums, to consider that recommendation. We're looking at again. Councillor Keeling, thank you.
Sorry there, Mr Chairman, it's me again. It's very important, this, very important. Yes. So, Mr Chairman, tax premiums. If I can quote, the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill includes the following provision. The bill recognises the impact that high levels of second home ownership can have in some areas and will introduce a new discretionary council tax premium on a second home of up to 100%. It will also allow councils to apply a council tax premium of up to 100% on homes which have been empty for longer than 1 year, rather than the 2 years as is current. This will encourage more empty homes into productive use while enabling councils to raise and retain additional revenue to support local services. So, Mr Chairman, based on current numbers of properties held on our records, 1,240 would fall into this criteria. Income generated from the premium would be shared across preceptors, including county, police, fire and towns and parishes. Teignbridge would retain around 9%, which is about £225,000. We feel that the actual amount of additional income generated could be significantly lower as a result of the concerns noted in 2.3, 2.4 and 2.5 set out. The number of properties fluctuate on a daily basis and is likely to be reduced when the premiums are announced, with some council taxpayers choosing to sell, rent out or even move into their second homes. Again, I would like to thank the Service Lead for Revenue and Benefits and Customer Support, Tracy Hooper, for her and her team for the hard work on this. Mr. Chairman, I propose the Council accepts A. The application of the current premium of 100% for all dwellings which are unoccupied and substantially unfurnished empty dwellings after the first year instead of the second, with effect from the 1st of April 2024. B. The application of a premium of 100% for all dwellings which are unoccupied, substantially furnished, with effect from the 1st of April 2024. And C. That the 151 officer be given delegated powers in consultation with the relevant executive member to implement the policy in line with the Council's requirements and any guidance given by the Secretary of State. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You got that, Sarah? Yeah. Indeed. Right, members, opening this one up to debate, as you've heard the recommendations, A, B and C. Is there anybody who would like to speak on this? Councillor Bullivant.
Thank you. Overall, I approve of the proposals. You use words like substantially within your definitions. Can we have a definition of what that actually means, please?
It's a home that has furniture within it that is lived in.
Thank you for that. The only concern I have, obviously, is what represents. Is it a chair left in a house? Is it a fully furnished house? You know, there must be some definitive method around which the calculations can be based. Thank you.
Councillor Connaught will try to answer that.
Chairman, I suspect substantially is a word used in the legislation. Perhaps, as the officers here, it might be helpful if Tracy Hooper could just update the council on what that might mean.
Yes, right at the back for a microphone. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, substantially is a term that is it's not defined in legislation as much by case law. So we do have to look at each case on its merits. But essentially, a house needs to be capable of occupation. So you would expect to see. You would expect to see a bed, you would expect to see a cooker, you would expect to see a fridge, you would expect to see somewhere to be able to eat a meal, you would expect to have perhaps a sofa, you would expect flooring. So it's really a common sense approach, I suppose you could suggest, that you would need to expect someone to be able to live in the property with the usual furnishings in place. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much.
I think it might help here. Councillor Russell.
It's really just a query. If a flat or a home is substantially furnished, then are they paying business rate or domestic rate? Because this was always a question raised, you know, with winter lets and this kind of thing, when properties are empty in the winter time. Thank you.
I think Tracy Hooper's best placed to answer that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, a flat that's used as a domestic residence would be the same as any property. It would be charged council tax. It's only if it's used for holiday letting purposes that it could potentially be charged business rates. And it will only be charged business rates if it meets certain criteria. And that criteria is being strengthened from 1st of April this year by new government legislation that will require properties to be available for let for 140 days per year and actually let for 70 of those days. And there will be evidence, businesses will be required to provide evidence to substantiate their application for business rates liability.
I think that's very helpful to know. It applies a lot in my patch at Shaldon, this, so thank you very much. Any other speakers? Anybody else? Well, you've heard the A, B and C recommendations from Councillor Keeling was seconded. May we go to the vote on this, please? Those in favour? Those against? Those wishing to abstain? One abstention. Carried. Thank you very much. Now we move on to item 9 in the agenda. The implications of Michael Gove's statement on the changes to the planning system. And I think this falls to the portfolio holder to update us. Thank you, Gary. Gary Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members, item 9 concerns the officer report on the letter of the 5th of December 2022 from Michael Gove MP to all members of Parliament and the subsequent written ministerial statement published on the 6th of December relating to proposed changes to the planning system in England alongside the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill. Copies of these respective documents are included at Appendices 1 and 2 of the officer report. As members will recall, Council was due to consider the proposed submission's draft new local plan at the meeting of the 15th of December last year. The contents of the letter and the ministerial statement, however, raised several issues that require further consideration, leading to the postponement of that meeting to allow officers and members the opportunity to reflect on what was said and meant and to understand the potential implications for the Council emerging local plan. A meeting of the cross-party local plan working group was subsequently convened on the 15th of December, meetings of which all members are regularly invited. Following this December meeting, letters were sent to Anne-Marie Morris MP and to Mel Stride MP seeking further clarification on the statement found at Appendix 3. On the 22nd of December, the Government published its consultation on changes to the National Planning Policy Framework. This Government consultation runs until the 2nd of March, and while none of the questions posed have been considered to warrant a delay to the local plan process, a full review of the consultation documents will be undertaken with the local plan working group in the coming weeks to help inform the Council's response, as we have done previously to consultations on the white paper, the planning white paper. Today's report provides members with an overview and a recommendation based on the content of the Secretary of State's letter and written ministerial statement. A written ministerial statement is an expression of government policy. However, until such time as the changes are brought into effect, the starting point for decision-making remains the existing National Planning Policy Framework policies, including the numbers used in the plan where housing need in Teignbridge is established using the standard method formula. An appraisal of how the proposed changes relate to the draft new local plan can be found at section 3, while the various risks in delaying or halting the consultation and submission process are further covered at section 4. Members will note that the protections offered from the Secretary of State's letter relate to plans at an advanced stage of preparation. This would not apply to Teignbridge based on the current local plan. Such protections would help prevent landowners using the appeals process to try to gain permission for development on unwelcome, unallocated sites. These protections include only having to demonstrate a 4-year supply of housing land rather than the current 5-year supply, and would apply to authorities which have consulted on a plan with both a policies map and proposed allocations towards meeting housing needs, as our new draft plan does today. Undertaking the consultation and submitting the local plan to the Planning Inspectorate would mean the Council would then benefit from this protection. In conclusion, therefore, it is considered that the letter from the Secretary of State and the consultation on the National Planning Policy Framework do not raise new issues that would justify pausing the process. I would therefore propose, Mr. Chairman, that, as set out, we note in 1, the content of this report and its appendices, and at 2, proceed to consider the report on the local plan consultation as set out in the agenda.
Thank you for the proposal. Is somebody seconding that? Councillor Connaught is going to second that proposal. I'm opening this up to debate. And now, would anybody like to say anything? Please raise your hand. Councillor Bullivant.
Thank you for the report, and thank you for the copies of the letter from the Secretary of State. The question I have is, I believe that the current work that's being carried out is appropriate for Teignbridge to look at. My issue relates to the question of how do we determine how many houses Teignbridge needs in future, as laid down in the letter from the Secretary of State. Historically, since 1911, the census has shown an almost straight line increase each 10-year period of 8.4% in the number of households in Teignbridge. That rate of growth implies that we need to be building approximately a minimum of 600 homes, well, it's actually 580 homes per year, just to meet that historical growth. Over the last 4 years, we've substantially fallen short of that number. Therefore, what framework are we going to put in place to establish a realistic number for the district as we move forward? And when can we expect to have that sort of information available for us to discuss? Thank you.
If I may, Chair.
Let's go to Councillor Taylor first, but rather than an officer try to answer at the back. Right.
Thank you, Chair. Currently we have the National Planning Policy Frameworks standard method formula, and that is the number that we continue to be directed at. That number was hovering at around the 760 mark a year or two ago. It's now 741, I believe.
That's correct.
And we will be using that as the basis, for the time being at least, for the number, as we have been directed by MP Michael Gove.
Was it Michelle Luscombe, the officer at the back, looking to comment on this as well? Thank you, Gary, for your very good answer.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, as Councillor Taylor has said, we are currently using, under the system of the existing MPPF, which is in place for this plan. Following this plan, and in due course, as we know more certainty around whether or not the changes in the MPPF do come into force, we will look to review the housing figure using up-to-date census data, which is due to be published in 2024, and that will inform the next iteration of the plan.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wishing to speak? Councillor Richard Dawes.
Hi, thank you.
Right, okay.
A couple of points, actually. The first one is in relation to Michael Gove's comments and publications, which, when in headline terms, sort of appear quite encouraging, but when you get into the detail, realise it's some sort of appeasement and electioneering on behalf of the Conservative Party. So incredibly disappointing getting into the detail of that and what potentially actually gives the council and districts to rail back on housing numbers. What we have seen, however, is some progressive and more environmentally caring councils take an approach where they've said that they aren't going to adhere to the standard method, and they're going to choose their own housing targets. I think Bristol would be one of those authorities, and Wiltshire as well, has been mentioned. And it's hugely disappointing that since we were elected, that even now the council hasn't read the report that was prepared by Abbots Kerswell Parish Council in 2012 that outlined the housing number was closer to 444 houses needed for the district. A number that's sort of been verified by the CPRRA, so that's it's just a matter of fact that the council hasn't taken an alternative approach. It does have 41% of the district in the national park, and it is has the issues of coastal towns as well. So. Very disappointed to see the council just kowtow to national housing numbers and operate in a very subservient way.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dawes. Before I come to Councillor McGregor, and Councillor Bullivan. Councillor Gary Taylor would like to reply to that. So, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I do consider this authority to be a progressive council, but I also consider it to be a responsible council. Other councils who may have the luxury of a higher 5-year housing land supply, ours currently stands at 6.14%, may be able to take a little bit of extra time. I know Stockport, for instance, are also doing the same, but we find ourselves in the horns of a dilemma here, because we have not only a housing land supply at 5-year land supply at 6.14 years, we also have a 3-year housing delivery test that's about to fail, and may, if it doesn't drop us into the area of the presumption in favour of sustainable development by being under 75% of the total over the last 3 years, then it will certainly put us in a position where we've already done an action plan, but to that action plan will be added a 20% buffer. And if you add a 20% buffer onto the 5-year housing land supply, you'll see that it is just over 5%, and that would take us into a position where the developers can be taking us via the appeal process, as I mentioned earlier, to a situation where building happens where we don't want it, where it's not allocated, and certainly it's not something that I would recommend. In terms of the numbers that he's quoted from the Abbots Kerswell Parish Council, I think Councillor Dawes has got his numbers the wrong way around. He was also quoting the CPRE, of which I'm a member. The numbers that the CPRE think are reasonable for Teignbridge are at 540. That's a figure actually that on the back of an envelope I've considered to be, looking at the census data, about the right sort of number, and could agree with that, but that's not the case that we've got at the moment. We've got the government's numbers only to be guiding us, and currently, while Michael Gove is suggesting that in time to come that number will be advisory, at the moment it's mandatory. That's the way we've got to go.
Thank you. So we'll take Councillor McGregor next, please.
Thank you, Chair. One of the excellent points covered by Councillor Taylor there was the housing delivery target, which we've struggled to achieve over the last 3 years, and with announcements from 4 developers over the last week that the housing market is slowing down, how will we address that particular shortfall that will continue into the probably in the coming 2 years, bearing in mind that some of the approvals that we've seen over the last 3 years have yet to actually start commencing building. For instance, TE3, which is rushed through on the basis that houses would be delivered by May this year, then we are looking at a situation where our housing delivery targets are going to fail to be met, even on the current model. And under the new system, assuming we get a local plan done, that will continue to happen as well. So we may even fall short of our required 540 to see the growth that we see at the moment across the district. My big problem with the letter and intent from the Secretary of State, as articulated by Councillor Dawes, is that this appears to be superficial at best, I believe. There's a lot of promises about addressing developers, but as we know, the Conservatives are funded heavily by developers, having received over £10 million in the previous general election. So from that perspective, my concern is that we're going to be assuming and making our decisions based on something that won't actually happen. This hasn't gone through as legislation, and I believe that our guidance will maintain and the plan will maintain at the current levels, which is, I believe, 741. One of the big difficulties that we have, of course, is the repeated point articulated by Councillor Keeling about the cost of living crisis is going to continue to have an impact not only on the cost of materials for houses, it's going to push the prices of houses beyond the reach of most of our residents. My question, therefore, would be, would this council then be looking to become a local development corporation of it in its own right to start providing homes for local residents? Thank you.
You can have a shot at answering his question, Councillor Taylor, or is it officer material?
I think at this point I do have a response in terms of the questions that in terms of the statement that Councillor McGregor was putting in terms of the numbers that that developers build, and certainly at the moment we seem to be entering into a teeth of a pretty much self-imposed recession. Which, with interest rates going up, that's going to have an enormous effect on the housing market. And my consideration about the housing numbers that are handed down from government, it's like pushing on string. At the end of the day, that no matter whether it's 741 or the other number that we heard, what was it, 18 months ago, 1,523 that was calculated as being the right number for Teignbridge, which was laughed out of court. It's not going to make any difference at all as to what is built. That's a matter for the market. And there is a market forces mention in the written ministerial statement. Again, I think it's deceptive about what it actually means. It certainly doesn't mean that if there aren't people to buy the houses, that doesn't mean we shouldn't be giving further permissions. But I would like some further perhaps details from. We've got all of our officers here at the back, all of our spatial planning officers who've done an enormous amount of work on our local plan, and it would be great if we could hear what they have to say.
Certainly,
too.
certainly.
Thank you, Chair. I'll pick this one up if that's okay. There's a couple of points, if I may. Can I just come back to the issue of the housing numbers for the previous local plan? That was assessed at independent examination. So the alternative ways of doing it were fully debated and considered by the inspector, and the council's approach was found to be sound and ultimately adopted. So I think we've demonstrated in the past of the correct approach in line with what's expected of us, based on what's required to meet the needs for the population. I'd also identify that reference to the census is only one part of assessing housing need. You've also got to look at the household makeup and how that changes over time. So whilst population may increase or decrease, it's the average number of people per property, and we've seen consistently over years household size reduce, and so from that you need to provide more residents, more properties to meet that need. Picking up the point about how we respond to the slowdown in the market and what pressure that may bring, and obviously some of that's outside of our control. It'll ultimately be to the market to deliver the housing required. What I would say is the previous local plan had a mixture of large strategic sites and smaller sites, which helped with the trajectory of delivering the right amount of houses per year. The smaller sites have pretty much been built out in the local plan. We are now reliant on the larger strategic sites, which will take a long time because much more complex, there's multiple ownerships, and it takes a longer time to deliver. So whilst they're probably the next, within 4 or 5 years' time, the development of those schemes will start to improve our delivery rate. We need to put in place plans for smaller scale sites that will help the delivery. So the local plan proposes that smaller, more small scale sites. So by having a plan in place, we'll be in greater control of helping to bring and try and address as best as we can support delivery of smaller scale sites to keep us away from the risks of smaller schemes coming that aren't allocated in the local plan.
Thank you to Neil Blaney, one of our senior officers of the council, for answering that. I've got 2 more speakers at the moment wanting to speak, and those are Councillor Bullivant and Councillor Patch. I don't know, not sure who has had his name up first, but I'll take Councillor Patch. I think you had your name up first.
Thank you, Chair. As Councillor Dawes has pointed out, other progressive councillors are challenging the official targets that have been handed down. Our council is not taking that approach. I find it interesting that both the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats seem to be hand-wringing and saying that there is no scope for challenging these figures, and seem to be almost in a position of outbidding each other as to how many homes they'd like to build across Teignbridge. Be interesting to see if they carry on with this as election time approaches. I suspect there'll be some sort of double talk as that time does approach, but we will see. I was going to ask questions regarding the funding that both parties take from housing developers, which might have some relation to their stance on house building. I thank Councillor McGregor for raising this issue and pointing to a figure for the Conservatives. I wonder if can anybody from the Liberal Democrat Party provide a figure as to nationally how much their party receives from housing developers, and whether any talks might be ongoing with them to receive any more funding as the next election approaches. And I'm thinking about a general election.
Councillor Collins caught my eye to try and reply to that as leader of the Liberal Democrats. I think he's...
Chairman, as leader of the Liberal Democrats in Teignbridge, I'm not in discussion with any developer for contributions. Thank you very much.
That's, well, I'm not... We might be able to get an officer at the back to answer that. Difficult one.
I'm not going to comment on anything politically. I just wanted to pick up on the suggestion that we haven't challenged the housing figures. So just to be clear, the current National Planning Policy Framework does say that the housing number based on the standard method is a starting point for consideration, and that exceptional circumstances could justify a different approach. And that currently considers two main factors. One of those is taking into account genuine constraints. That includes aspects such as Dartmoor National Park, and European wildlife sites, SSSIs, and those other sorts of constraints. And those have all been taken into consideration, and we have still been able to identify through the plan sufficient land to meet the 741 homes a year. So we do not believe, in our professional view, that we have those exceptional circumstances to warrant a different approach, both based on that flexibility. Secondly, we have undertaken our own local housing needs assessment. This is part of the evidence base for the local plan, and that does sensitivity check the standard method formula, and it does conclude that there's insufficient evidence, having looked at all other different data sets, to suggest at this point in time that an alternative method for calculating housing need is could be supported.
Thank you, Michelle Luscombe. The next speaker on that was on this subject is Councillor Bullivant.
Thank you for that. As leader of the Conservative group, I'd like to emulate the comment that Councillor Leader for the Lib Dems made, that certainly we've not received any money from developers, so thank you. And I appreciate the laughs. In terms of the question I originally asked, it was recognising that there is this current state, current number that we obviously required to use, but moving forward, reading from the letter with your permission, it says, it will be up to local authorities working with their communities to determine how many homes can actually be built, taking into account and what should be protected in each area, be that our precious greenbelt or national parks, the character of an area, or heritage assets. It will also be up to them to increase the proportion of affordable housing if they wish. My question was, I accept where we are at the moment, but it's moving forward. When will this council be provided with information to say how this requirement is going to be translated, given that over the last 4 years we're roughly 1,000 homes short of our target, which implies that 250 affordable homes have not been delivered. And we've seen a 250 increase in the people on the housing waiting list over that same period. Thank you.
Councillor Collett is going to answer that one.
Well, Chairman, I think I can assist. Obviously, the current item is primarily for information, yes. And I think the question Councillor Bullivant asks is more pertinent to the next item.
I have picked that up.
So I don't think it will. I think if Councillor Bullivant will put that question in the next session, that may well be. But for the minute, we were just simply noting that we had paused the council meeting from December to now. Yeah. We had written to we noted the Secretary of State's statement. We'd written to the members of Parliament and wanted to lay before members the responses. And I think to some extent, we should put the recommendations that are in 9, which was basically to note and move on, and then get into the substantive debate, which is primarily agenda item 10, Chairman, if you're agreed.
Yeah, it's exactly my thoughts, because the recommendation on this particular item is just to note the content of the report and the appendices, and then proceed to the report on the local plan consultation. So you've answered that. So Councillor Cox did want to speak briefly, and then I propose to take the recommendation so that we can actually get into the nitty-gritty, as it were. Thank you.
A bit annoyed. I think he's got a lot of bazaar for Councillor Patch to say that about the Liberal Democrats. I've just looked on the Electoral Commission website, and there does not appear to be any donations from developers that I can see. In total, the Liberal Democrats nationally received £1.5 million. You know, Councillor McGregor said about it was in fact 11 million, not 10 million, that the Conservative Party received from developers or their friends. But Councillor McGregor also mentioned TE3. Something that Teignmouth Liberal Democrats really oppose hard. Earlier on, we had Councillor Richard Ash here, a retired geologist, a brain the size of a planet, who was going to oppose TE3. But we didn't get Councillor Ash. What we got was someone from South Devon Alliance, a gentleman whose contribution to Teignmouth politics is to be claimed that Teignbridge District Council was going to ban 99 ice creams on the beaches. He went. And you can watch, don't take my word for it. Watch the opponent of the. He used the objector slot on TE3 at the planning committee. Watch him. He basically said, "You're going to do this anywhere. Goodbye," and off he went. And this was a South Devon Alliance supporter. This was the intellectual brilliance of them doing that. So they don't need to lecture us about opposing house building.
I don't propose to get in this spat. Let's see if we can go to the I will take it, Councillor Malone. Yes, I'll allow you to speak.
Ask the previous member what the hell he's talking about. There's only 4 people in the South Devon Alliance, and it wasn't any of us.
Oh, it was a person who is a supporter, who's always quoting you, actually.
No, you said it was the South Devon Alliance.
My apologies. A
so
supporter.
You just deliberately said something untrue. Well done. Nice going, mate.
You know more about that than me.
More Lib Dem lies. Thank you for that.
I said the South Devon Alliance supporter, and he is a supporter, and he's on record as a supporter.
You lied.
Yeah.
We will see, won't we? We'll see if he's a candidate for you.
You're a liar.
I think you've all made your points here. It's getting near an election. If we can just calm it now, I think you've both made your points that you want to make. Thank you very much. Now, can I take the recommendation, please? No, I propose to move on. I'm sorry. And the recommendation is to note the content of this report and appendices and to proceed to consider the report of the local plan consultation as set out in the agenda. So there'll be plenty of time for more of this banter, if you like to put it like that, in the next item to come. So can I have a show of hands, please, of those in support of the recommendation? Those against the recommendation and those abstaining. Right. Thank you very much. That's avoided suspending the meeting and everything as we manage to move on. Thank you very much indeed. Right. I've got to gather my thoughts and move my own computer on now and all of that. Right. So where are we now? We're on to the actual nitty-gritty. It's the Teignbridge proposed submission local plan 2020 to 2040, pages 165 to 174. Are you introducing? You're going to introduce it, and then we're going to have Neil Blaney is going to talk on it, and Michelle Luscombe has done a lot of the work, and I think Michelle Luscombe's one of the officers underneath her is going to have a word as well, so that we'll get into the nitty-gritty of this before we have a comfort break, I'm sure. Thank you. Carry on, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Members, the development of a new local plan for Teignbridge, which began in 2017, has today reached an important milestone. New planning policies concerning how future development is managed along with new site allocations for where homes, employment premises and wind turbines can be built, are now ready for the final stage of public consultation prior to examination. As I have noted in the foreword of our new local plan document at Appendix A, I firmly believe this is an ambitious, forward-looking new local plan that will help deliver better and more environmentally sustainable development in our district over the next 2 decades. At the top of the new local plan to-do list has been making sure that people have access to the homes, jobs, green spaces and services that they need, while reducing also our carbon footprint and improving energy resilience. In doing so, we must also currently meet our government's target for house building and, of course, conserve and, wherever possible, enhance our very special and valued environments. We are confident our plans do just this. It includes tougher policies to help fight climate change and also stronger support for our environment. It identifies enough land for new homes to be built and for employment opportunities to flourish. It tasks developers with designing beautiful places, building more genuinely affordable homes, and to contribute to the infrastructure that our growing communities need. In our search for new development, we have been directed by 3 guiding principles: taking every opportunity to use brownfield sites first, including redevelopment and regeneration within our town centres; locating most of our new homes where they will be close to jobs, services and sustainable transport routes; and seeking out smaller sites for housing in larger villages to help sustain essential local services and facilities. This plan is the result of all these wide-ranging considerations, brought together by a cross-party working group of elected members and a dedicated officer planning team. Their continual efforts deserve our thanks, as together they have brought forward a plan which will raise the standards of development, enable housing and employment for the benefit of our families and future generations, and safeguard the special characteristics and biodiversity of our district. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank, on behalf of the Council, those many organisations and members of the public who have already responded to our previous local plan consultations. The passion people have shown for their communities and their local environment has been remarkable, with over 7,000 responses received, covering a wide range of comments and views. These comments have all been read and collated under Appendix F, and will have done much to inform the final draft of the new local plan. Mr. Chairman, as you and our members will know, there is a huge amount of very interesting and absorbing detail in the local plan and its supporting documents, which I'm sure the public will already be diving into to read. I'm sure also that the public and many other organisations will be keen to have their say, and I would certainly encourage as many people as possible to take part in this final consultation prior to the plan going to inspection. I would therefore like to propose, Mr. Chairman, that further to the considerations of the documents we have before us today, we move recommendations 1 to 8 as set out, and move recommendation 9, which begins by stating, following consultation, submit the proposed local plan 2020 to 2040 and associated documents to the Secretary of State for the Department of Levelling Up, Housing and Communities to begin proceedings for public examination, with the additional wording that this will include granting delegated authority to the Head of Place and Commercial Services in consultation with the Executive Member for Planning and the Chair of the Local Plan Working Group to recommend minor modifications to the inspector prior to submission, while any major modifications will be referred to full council. And to propose also, finally, an additional recommendation, which we heard a little from Michelle earlier, recommendation 10, subject to the current proposed changes into the National Planning Policy Framework coming into effect, which relates specifically to housing requirements becoming advisory, the Council commits to undertake a review of the district's housing needs immediately following adoption of the 2020-2040 local plan, which takes into account forthcoming census-based household and population projections and if a lower housing requirement is identified, proceed with an urgent partial review of the plan which reflects a lower housing needs target. Mr. Chairman, members, thank you.
That's seconded by Councillor Conrad. Right, before we open it up to debate, we're going to hear more from Neil Blaney and then Michelle. Because it's going straight to Michelle,
just
are we?
me, thank you, yeah. Okay. I'm not going to comment on the detail of the plan. As I understand, we'll be going through that section by section in due course, but I just wanted to set out some procedural matters. The local plan before you is the Regulation 19 version of the plan. So this means that it's the final draft and it's the version that we are agreeing to submit to the Secretary of State following consultation. There is scope following the consultation to consider any comments to the plan and recommend modifications to the inspector examining the plan if we consider that to be appropriate. The local plan 2020 to 2040 is set out in two parts. Part one contains a set of policies which manage how development takes place, and Part 2 contains site allocations for new homes, employment premises, gypsy and traveller sites, and wind turbines. All local authorities are required to have an up-to-date local plan. As plans become out of date, there are greater risks and government-imposed penalties. These are all set out in Section 5C of the report. As you will already be aware from the previous report, there are significant benefits to us reaching the Regulation 19 stage of consultation on the plan. Alongside it being a significant step in updating the current local plan, which is now several years old, this relates to us securing a more favourable housing land supply position while we take the plan through examination. Alongside the plan, there are various supporting documents and the policies map. With the exception of Appendix E, these are legally required to be prepared and consulted on as part of the plan. Appendix E is the draft Community Infrastructure Levy charging schedule, which sets the rates payable for new developments towards new infrastructure in the district. The local plan covers the period from 2020 to 2040. A lot of the evidence that supports the plan forecasts change and development requirements up to that date and beyond in some cases. This allows us to set policies which are fit to meet future demands, as well as respond to the issues that we want to address at the moment. Within this 20-year plan period, we are making provision for 15 years' worth of housing land supply. National policy requires us to ensure that we identify sufficient land for the first 10 years of the plan and, wherever possible, for years 11 to 15. The amount of housing should meet our objectively assessed need, which should be calculated using the standard method unless exceptional circumstances justify an alternative approach. As has already been discussed, such circumstances have been examined and are considered not to apply to Teignbridge at this time. As such, the district's housing requirement stands at 741 homes a year, totalling 11,856 homes over 15 years. We are also required to provide a 20% buffer because of our recent trends in under-delivery of housing. The plan therefore makes provision for 12,489 homes, which is set out in Policy H1 on pages 59 and 60 of Appendix A, which is the plan, and that enables us to have 15 years' worth of housing from the point at which we anticipate adopting the plan, which we hope will be early 2024. The plan before you is the culmination of 4 rounds of consultation, extensive evidence, and continued liaison with the local plan working group. The site allocations within the plan have been proposed on the basis that they meet the preferred distribution of development, which has been developed with the local plan working group and has been consulted on. This distribution is based on firstly prioritising brownfield development, allocating most development close to jobs, homes and services, and jobs, services and public transport, and supporting the sustainability of village services with proportional levels of development. The site assessment themselves have involved detailed site investigations, environmental assessments, and site visits to which all ward members were invited to attend. Potential site options were then refined through discussions with the local plan working group. Importantly, the decision has been taken to not allocate in settlements simply for the sake of allocating in a particular location. Increasingly, potential development sites are becoming more and more constrained by their physical attributes and/or increasing distance away from town or village centres and services. This means that it isn't always possible to locate new development in a particular settlement which might otherwise appear to be a good, sustainable location. This is particularly the case at present with Teignmouth and Dawlish. We have consulted with infrastructure providers and statutory consultees, including Historic England, the Environment Agency, National Highways, Natural England, the NHS and South West Water throughout the preparation of this plan, and have included any requirements or responded to any concerns raised by them wherever possible and relevant. You will see that site-specific requirements are included within individual allocation policies, and the overall infrastructure requirements are set out in policy GP7, including a per-dwelling contribution towards NHS infrastructure. The plan is presented to you as a document which officers consider to be sound, and on this basis, it is recommended that it and its supporting documents are published for consultation from the 23rd of January to the 23rd of January to the 13th of March 2023, followed by submission to the Secretary of State for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. So that's all from me at the moment. Obviously, I'm happy to take questions, but could I please invite the Chair to invite Councillor Goodman-Bradbury to speak on behalf of the Local Plan Working Group?
Yes, indeed, Councillor Goodman-Bradbury. Look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you for your permission. I just have a few words just to add. The Local Plan Working Group has offered a way for members from all across the political divide in the Council to have a say on the progress of the plan. We started meeting on the 21st of October 2019 and have met many times since. I'm not going to list them. Hopefully members have read all of the details, and particularly the background paper, number 3. This gives all the full details. We last met as an extraordinary Local Plan Working Group on the 15th of December 2022 regarding the Right Honourable Michael Gove's planning reforms and his statement. Much has been said about that already. The working group has been an open and productive forum that has allowed everyone of the group and other members to have their say and question the process, the policy, and discuss these with other members and the officers. As the current chair, I would like to say a few thank yous, please, particularly to the previous chair, Mike Haynes, for his work on the HELA process, and the officers for their ongoing work and support, and all of the members' engagement on this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So we're now going to get into the nitty-gritty of how I handle this, I think, really. I've got the local plan, obviously, in front of me. Some of you have probably got it online and what have you. And I propose, I think the best thing to go through it is literally, if you want to speak on it, we'll go through each section. Here are the various sections: general policies 1, climate change 2, design and well-being 3, economy 4, homes 5, environment 6, site allocations are 7, and that morphs into 8, Newton Abbot and King Staten Garden community policies and allocations. 9's the edge of Exeter. 10 is coastal towns, 11 is rural towns, and B12 is villages. So I think the best thing I can do is start at the beginning, and then you catch my eye if you want to speak on that. Do I see a sort of general nod of approval? Does that make sense to members to try and do it? Does that make sense to you, Councillor Taylor? Would you like me to handle it that way? Right, okay, so we'll have we're going into the plan. Don't forget it's just a bit of background from myself in the chair. It's 175 pages long, as you realise, for members of viewing this on YouTube. And you'll see that I made some notes here that Newton Abbot and King Staten Garden community is where 37% of the homes are proposed to be built. The edge of Exeter, 46%, coastal towns 5%, villages 12%. And that includes employment, 55%, Newton Abbot. Edge of Exeter is 31%, coastal and rural towns 5%, and villages 9%. That's a total introduced of 4,560 new homes are allocated in this plan. Okay, so that sets the background for it, I think. So Has anybody wants to speak on the general policy is in the plan, pages 14 to 24? So anybody you want to have a go? Councillor Swain, like to speak on that?
Thank you, Chair. I do have general comments to make about the plan as well.
Yes.
Presumably we're going to take those at the end.
Yes, I think that makes sense. We don't want to stop anybody.
I won't take time now thanking the officers for the work and so forth.
Yes.
But in the general policies, I do want to draw attention to the comments about, so in our area, in the community that I serve, inert waste landfill sites are a very large, substantial issue for the community, and there is an issue that developers produce as much waste as they like. Devon County feels the need to meet the demand for landfill sites, and there doesn't appear to be any limitation to how much this can go on. And in the new plan, there are specific wording in General Policy 1, I think it is. Sorry, General Policy 1, I think it is. There's specific wording about developers minimising the export of waste and accommodating waste material on site. It's a very subtle change, but for the first time we can actually see something concrete which says developers need to minimise this damaging practice. Thank you very much.
Okay. Right, does anybody else want to speak on general policies, pages 14 to 24? Right, we'll move to your portfolio holder, isn't it? Councillor Hook here, really. Climate change 2. Does anybody want to speak on that? That's pages 27 to 38. No? Fine. Make sure you catch my eye if you do.
Councillor Patch.
Oh, Councillor Patch, you did catch my eye in the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a general point. I've been having problems with my laptop and I can't actually access it online. Is there a hard copy available at the moment? Or otherwise, can somebody share the password for the Wi-Fi to get in on this, the local network?
Someone from the back has come forward kindly to give you what you want. Got what you want? Well done. Right. Councillor Hook. Here, microphone here, if I may.
Thank you, Chair. I was waiting to see if others made comments before I made some comments.
Yep.
I just wanted to, again, I'm not sure where it's appropriate to make general comments, but
why not?
Also to credit the work of the local plan working group. As has already been said, cross-party group of members. We've been meeting for the last 2 or 3 years regularly to discuss all aspects of the local plan, the process, how consultations are carried out, the results of those consultations, the policies and the sites in quite considerable detail. It's obviously an advisory group, not a decision-making body. But I feel it worked well, and I feel that collectively we have pushed policies as far as we possibly can, with reference to what other councils around the country are doing in all the broad areas of topics. But personally, in my area of climate change, I feel we've pushed as far as we can on the policies, where it maybe hasn't gone as far as maybe I and possibly some from Action on Climate in Teignbridge would feel it has gone. I think we, through the working group, have understood why it hasn't been able to go that far, and that's usually because of national planning policy constraints or other legislation that means we cannot go that far. But I feel we really have pushed as far as we can. The policies we have now for addressing climate change in our district are so significantly better than where we are with our existing local plan. And that's why one of the many very good reasons why we must continue down the path of adopting our local plan. There are, I don't agree with the housing numbers as they are. I could say a lot on that, but the outlined within the report we've just had and the local plan are some very good reasons why we do need to continue to adoption, and adopting these policies on climate change is top of the list for me. Thank you.
Well, if I can just say thank you for all the hard work you've done on it too, from the chair. If we can move on then to commenting on... Councillor Dawes now, is that? Sorry, Richard, I didn't see you.
No, you didn't have a line of sight, so it's okay. I sort of reinforce, but probably double down on what a lot of Councillor Hook just said. The policies are better, but they're nowhere near as good as they should be. And if we speak sort of metaphorically, our house is on fire, and now isn't the time for us to say we're constrained by national planning policy. Now is the time to do what Extinction Rebellion are doing, and actually take a stand and do something that is really sort of forward-thinking and progressive. I know Councillor Taylor said we are a progressive council. We're progressive in words and not in actions. The greatest thing that would have had an impact would have been reviewing the housing targets. I know Councillor Hook said she'd prefer that they were less. Well, taking some actions on that as member of the executive would have been slightly more helpful. The CPRE did say 540 houses for the district, so that's a reduction of 200 per year. That would have had a huge impact. So it's sort of disappointing that the group that I sat on the planning, the working group for the local plan, almost as a conscientious objector, but at least seeing how the process actually ran. And I note Michelle's comments that within the constraints that they were able to deliver the 700 houses. I mean, those constraints are if you shoehorn development in between a European protected site and a triple SA and impact on those areas, then you probably can build those houses. But that isn't really what a progressive council should be doing. We should have been making a stand. We should have made a stand before I was elected. We should have made a stand when we were elected and when we raised the questions, and we shouldn't have been put through standards complaints and smeared as councillors for questioning the housing numbers. So the whole process is disappointing. There seems to be a lot of platitudes and noises coming out the councils, but no particularly good solid actions. So there's my thought for where we're at on climate change. Thank you.
You want to come back, Councillor Taylor?
I do. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm very pleased, actually, that Councillor Dawes is at least right on one thing. He now has corrected himself, and the CPRE number is 540 and not the 440, which he stated earlier was similar to the Abbots Kurzweil number. But I don't really want to get involved with him on a bum fight about who is a progressive council and who isn't. I believe our policies are very progressive. I think we've proved that from declaring a climate emergency from 2025 and 2019. And if you look at more importantly, if you look at the policy that we've got in front of us today, on page 28 at B, major residential schemes for 10 or more houses from plan adoption to the 31st of from plan adoption to the 31st of from the 1st of January, I should say, 2025, achieve net zero carbon development via a minimum 75% reduction in carbon emissions against Part L of the Building Regs 2013, to be achieved through a reduction in energy consumption via a fabric first approach, which we promote. The remaining reductions in carbon emissions will be achieved through top-up by a combination of fabric improvements, on-site renewable energy generation, or if necessary, through equivalent financial contributions to an agreed Teignbridge approved carbon offsetting fund. I think this local plan, in terms of our environmental credentials and the progressive nature of this authority, speak for themselves.
I'm commenting on trying to keep it to climate change, pages 27 to 38. So Councillor Swain, then it'll be Councillor Hocking. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I want to second the support for the climate change chapter. Last year I took part in a task and finish group to look at Teignbridge's progress with the climate emergency. One of the activities there was a direct policy-by-policy comparison of the new and the former local plan, and having compared it sentence by sentence, it's hugely improved. In effect, there's a chapter on climate change here where there was a policy before. So I absolutely welcome that. Chair, I'm very conscious reading the room that we seem to all be itching to talk about housing numbers. Might I propose that we raise that next and then proceed to the section by section?
Well, I would like to go through it section by section and just follow it along if I may. So I'm going to decline.
That's fine. Can I suggest that we don't talk about housing numbers?
Well,
in the meantime?
Yeah. There's Councillor Hocking at the back next, and then it's Councillor McGregor.
Cheers. Thank you, Chairman. Mine is on climate change, and it's CC4, which is sustainable transport. We all have to welcome sustainable transport, I'm sure. My question is, what more powers has this council got that's going to actually bring all this to fruition? Bearing in mind that all the buildings so far being done around Newton Abbot, the sustainable transport has failed. There's not even a proper link between Heel Park and the town centre where you can walk safely. So what more powers does this new plan give this council to make sure that this is done not halfway through a development, but before the development starts, so the links are there, so that when the people move into their new houses, they have already got the links there. Because I think it's very important that those links are there. Thank you.
Yeah, Neil, I was hoping, I was looking towards officers. Neil Blaney.
Yeah, I'll pick up the response initially, and then Michelle will come back a little bit more. What we do through this plan, I guess I'll pick up the Heel Park bit to start with, actually, because that's a good example of the risks we face. Heel Park was allowed on appeal initially, and some of the links between that development and the routes into the town weren't ideal. What you're seeing now with the development that's coming forward is proper cycle infrastructure being put in place. So you'll see, as you go along Ashburton Road, for example, the footpath has been widened. By having these plans and looking longer term, we start to look more strategically at those networks and connections. So we've got the local cycling and walking plan for Newton Abbot, for example. But as part of development, we can request more strategic thinking about how these links are going to connect up. So the plans, the larger allocations, and what will come through in this plan will include not only the infrastructure on site for allowing better walking and cycling opportunities, but then strategic links around. So there's a lot that's already been implemented. You look along the Stover Way, you look at the plans that we're trying to bring forward for the Teen Estuary Trail, which is very high priority, and then there's the work going forward on Lincoln Tor Bay to Newton Abbot, for example. So part of those plans are based on what came from the last local plan. This plan includes more of the same. So that's part of the development as it comes forward. Development management can negotiate how that's going to work and bring that forward. Then there's the financial contributions that are made from development, which pay towards the infrastructure. So there's off-site requirements that comes through this as well. So there's good, strong relationship we've got with the county council. We've got the plans in place to implement. The local plan helps to do that. And I think, Heel Park should be a lesson that if we aren't careful and we're reliant on schemes by appeal, you don't get the strategic link up between it all. So that's how that's going to work moving forward. And I think there's significant power in that, we don't approve schemes as an authority unless we're comfortable that the impact of this is acceptable, that there is a plan in place for more sustainable forms of transport, and that all development is contributing to the wider infrastructure improvements.
Thank you for answering that. Michelle now.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to what Neil has said, I think the rhetoric is shifting definitely from central government all the way down now, in that the emphasis is now on sustainable and active transport, not on building new roads. So there's nothing in the plan for any new roads to be built other than within the developments themselves. So I think that's a really key point to make, and we're working closely with Devon County Council and their active transport team to ensure that the new developments do prioritise low traffic neighbourhoods wherever possible, and all active and sustainable travel links as well. I would draw your attention on page 22 in GP 7, point 7. There's a paragraph been included within that policy that was discussed and put forward by the local plan working group and developed with them. And I'll just read it out. So this is our infrastructure policy. It says, whilst recognising potential for development viability considerations, ensure that new development is provided with appropriate infrastructure as early in the development as possible. Connections to existing footpaths and cycleways will be delivered prior to or alongside the first occupation. Active travel links to potential long-term future development sites will be safeguarded. And that was directly in response to issues that we understand we're having at the moment.
I hope that's answered. I missed, going around the room, I missed people here. I think you were next. Councillor McGregor was next. Yes, sorry, Councillor McGregor. Carry on.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 points to raise. First of all is the sustainable travel element of it. As a small district with a heavy rural setting, we have roads that have had surface existing for around about 25 years, and the life extension of that is 40 years by government policy. The problem with extending life of road surfaces when you're actually increasing the traffic is that it doesn't last. And we're seeing increasing damage to road surfaces across the district. In fact, on the route in today on the A379, there was at least 6 brand new potholes along that stretch of road between Teignmouth and the roundabout at the dual carriageway. So, you know, whilst the government policy is not to put in new roads, we should be expecting increased investment in the current road system that we do have, particularly for safety of pedestrians, safety of cyclists and motorcyclists who are having to weave round potholes in the road. That's the first element to it. The second element is on the climate change, and you know, I remember not that long ago an excellent motion came through from Councillor Jackie Hook, on ocean cleanliness. Now I know that South West Water are a statutory consultee in the local plan because they provide water and wastewater provision. And Chair, you'll be on board with this, I'm sure, is that South West Water are failing even to maintain a level of disposal without releases into the estuaries and waterways of this district. I have seen no evidence from South West Water to say that they actually have a plan in place to prevent that. Ofwat, their recommendation is that this planning authority and all planning authorities across the country have regular, ongoing, detailed consultation meetings with their providers in their areas to ensure that wastewater and water supply is sustainable and manageable and that releases into the system are minimised. We're not seeing that. I also note that in the statutory consultation details, almost every single site for South West Water was at risk of overcapacity already. And again, I see nothing in the local plan that addresses that fact and requires South West Water to improve their provision. That is a real concern in an area, particularly, you know, and I was looking at this a few days ago. I think the Teign Estuary particularly is an area of outstanding natural beauty that is unrecognised, of course, by Natural England, but it is a phenomenal area. It has seafood fishing businesses working in that area. It has a very valuable tourist industry based around, a visitor industry based around people coming down to Teignmouth. And if we're not addressing situations like that, then we are going to put businesses and tourism at risk. The blue flag, I believe, is already perhaps been lost at one of the beaches that we have as a district. And that is a real concern as well. So from my perspective, we need to see more in the plan about what we're doing about South West Water's inability and failures to provide a service as it currently stands before we start building new infrastructure. Thank you.
Right, before I move to anybody else, what I'm trying to...
Would you like me to respond on that one?
Yeah, go on.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so as I sort of mentioned earlier, we have been liaising with South West Water as part of the preparation of the plan. And I don't know whether I know some of my senior officers have been involved in meetings with South West Water, so if they do want to speak, maybe I could invite them through the chair to speak. Oh, yeah, okay. But just before I hand over to Katie, just to sort of be clear that we can't enforce or, make policies for things that are outside the scope of new development. So we can't deal with necessarily the existing issues that take place, but we do have relevant policies in the plan that address the new development and the South West Water requirements. In terms of what they've fed back to us, they have informed us of all of the sewage and wastewater network requirements within all areas of the district wherever we're proposing development. And this will be included within the infrastructure delivery plan, which will be published as part of the consultation as background or as supporting information. They require all new developments to pay an infrastructure charge, and this covers the cost of the extra demand on the network. And all developments are also required to put in place sustainable drainage systems. So that's a summary, and hopefully, if it's okay, I'll pass over to Katie to provide you with a bit more detail about the discussions.
Thank you, Michelle. I don't actually think I've got anything to add to what you've just said.
Thank you. Yeah, all right. Yeah, I'm conscious, members, that we're going through this, if you like, item by item, and we're on climate change. What I'm really looking to tease out of you at the end of all this, if you want to change anything on climate change, you've got to come forward, with an amendment, I think, is to anything that's. Otherwise, what we're looking to do is let this document go forward for consultation. Therefore, we're having a chat about it. And if you want to change anything, you've got to put, I believe, you've got to put an amendment up, having said that in mind. So I'll leave members to ponder on that. If we can leave climate change now and go on to the third one, design and well-being, has anybody got anything to say on pages 41 to 44 on design and well-being that's in the plan?
Chair, we don't want to be changing it now.
We don't want to be changing it now.
Now is not the time to be changing it.
Well,
that's why you had the brief, Chair, earlier on.
Yeah, well, I do understand. I do understand that. I'm conscious that we're not going to filibuster this out of time. We'll sit down in America and talk it all out of time and what have you. I do want to get home tonight, like everybody. But anyway, right. I'm still going to stick to it. Councillor Hurt.
Thank you, Chair. I had put my hand up before.
Yes,
you did,
yeah, I know you
did.
Yes, yeah, I did. Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to say a little bit. Sorry, it's a general comment, but about the idea of building houses, how many houses you build, and the impact that has on climate change in our district, nationally or internationally. So, to me, the really important thing to think about is that the biggest impact on carbon emissions is how we travel around in our lives, so transport, and how we heat our homes. Those are the two most significant factors. So if you look at it that way, people can live in a house. They might live in Teignbridge, one of our new houses, but they're going to live somewhere. And what we've got to ensure collectively as a nation is that the houses we build for the people of this country, whether they're in Teignbridge or somewhere else, on the assumption that people will be living in a house somewhere, is that we collectively ensure that we enable people to travel as sustainably as possible, minimizing the use of the car by the way we locate development and the infrastructure we put in for sustainable and active travel, and then how we build those homes so that they are extremely energy efficient and any surplus heating is done non-fossil fuel heating. Now that is what this plan achieves. So we are going to locate houses where hopefully people will be able to maximise their use of sustainable and active travel, and we have in here the ability to achieve highly energy efficient housing with non-fossil fuel heating, and that's what we will demand through the policies of this plan. And that is the way I think we need to think of it. These houses will exist somewhere. Let's make sure the ones we build in Teignbridge are top quality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So can I move beyond then? Is there anybody that actually wants to comment on who's got his hand up? Councillor Dawes.
Yeah, just coming back on that point on climate change impact, and I think you missed food off that list, food production and consumption. But the what's missing in this plan then, in that instance, and I'd agree with you in terms of the most efficient housing is, if you get the train through Taunton, you'll see sort of multiple occupancy developments, the 3-4 story high blocks of flats looking very tidy around the station. What's missing out of this plan is where are those around Newton Abbot train station? Why is this just predicated with lots of greenfield sites once more, with the obvious loss of those green fields as carbon sinks?
Michelle? Councillor Taylor then.
Thank you, Chair. I think Richard Dawes is showing that he hasn't been looking at the documents again. But there is actually a site for 150 houses in Ford Close, just next to the station.
Okay. Do you want to come back, Councillor Dawes, very quickly?
Homes. Can I just add?
Yeah, go on, Michelle. Sorry.
I was going to say, obviously Councillor Taylor is correct. We have got an allocation at Ford Close for 150 units. I do expect those to probably be apartments, relatively high density there. Other options, obviously in the town centre, and as we'll come on to later on, have been thoroughly explored, but we do have significant areas of very high flood risk within the town centre, which limits our opportunities for developing there.
Okay, that answers that. So can I pass beyond climate change? And we've got to page 38 now. Yes, Councillor Goodman-Bradley. Not Councillor Goodman-Bradley. Councillor Bradford. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to disagree with Councillor Hook. One of the biggest climate change problems is what we put on our plate, how we farm our animals. It's worse than the reason she gave. Thank you.
Right. Oh, she's handing the microphone back. Anybody else on this, or can I go beyond this now? All right. Comment on design and well-being now. Oh, sorry, Councillor Hook. Again? I'm trying to move the meeting on.
Yeah, sorry. All. Well, I can't leave that there, can I? But
no.
I believe she's incorrect. It's transport and heating that is top, and probably food production and what we put on our plate probably is third. As far as the plan is dealing with those aspects, I'd like to think the transformation of the agricultural system isn't probably within the remit of the local plan. But, yeah.
Right, can I move on then to pages 41 to 44, which is design and well-being? Oh, Councillor Bradford, you want to come back on that comment, do you?
Thank you. It is within the remit because we're ripping up all the fields. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's move on now, as I said, to Councillor, to design and well-being. Anybody want to comment on pages 41 to 44? Right, well, let's move on to the fourth item there, which is the economy, which is pages 47 to 58. Right, item 5 is homes, which is pages 59 to 88 in the plan. Item 6 is the... Councillor Wrigley.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to draw Council's attention to the affordable homes policy, which is focusing on social rent. Now, unfortunately, we have to provide 25% of those affordable homes will be going to the government's First Home scheme, which is another ridiculous scheme that the government has put in place, which really won't help our residents very much. But the homes being provided for social rent certainly will. Thank you.
Okay. Now we're on to 6, which is the environment, pages 89 to 115. Okay. And we're getting to the nitty-gritty, which is what Councillor Swain requested, I believe. We're getting to the site allocations now, which is good. Site allocations is item 7, and it starts off with item 8 is the subheading Newton Abbot and Kingstayton Garden Community Policies and Allocations, pages 122 to 142. Has anybody got any comments that they want to make on that? Thank you. This was all fairly unanimous, wasn't it, at the local plan working group, so that's good to know that we're moving on. 9 is the edge of Exeter. People may want to comment on that, as significant housing's going in these two places. One we've just passed, which is the Newton Abbot one, or just, and we're going to the edge of Exeter, Councillor Swain, which is pages 145 to 153.
Thank you, Chair. Edge of Exeter is very much my area, and
yes.
The developments scheduled in here are extremely large, so I feel I should comment.
Yes, indeed.
The Markham Farm in particular is 900 homes. It is huge. The community are not keen on this site, and I have spoken against it at every opportunity in supporting the community with that view. Significant concerns have been raised about travel and the road network in the area, which are serious problems. To a large extent, those have been addressed, I recognise that, but there continues to be concern about areas like Alfrington Road. Whilst I appreciate we're not editing the plan on a case-by-case basis, I do want to be on note that I do continue to have serious concerns about the site. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Is anybody else wanting to speak on the edge of Exeter? No. Right, 10 is, we're doing very well now. We are getting a move on, which is glad to see. 10 is coastal towns, page 156. Anybody commenting on that? Pretty well Teignmouth and Dawlish are left alone from that, which you've heard.
Can I just say I'm very pleased to note the sites that are not being allocated.
Fine. Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the fact that Teignmouth and Dawlish have been excluded from the site allocations, and I was there for some of the discussions around reasons why. But the one thing that does concern me about that, of course, is when you talk about sustainable travel across the district, Teignmouth has a railway station, Dawlish has a railway station. They're well serviced by buses from Torquay right through to Exeter, from Newton Abbot through to Exeter, from Newton Abbot through to Torquay via that route. And it does concern me that when we're talking about sustainable travel, that we've ignored a massive elephant in the room with Teignmouth and Dawlish being on commuter routes for those people wishing to travel in either direction. And I think that is an opportunity missed. Thank you.
Okay. So, there's a hand up over there. Councillor Cox.
Teignmouth cannot take any more development. Our infrastructure cannot deal with it. In fact, Teignmouth has burst out of its boundaries. My parents live in what I call DOT, Dawlish Occupied Teignmouth. They have a Teignmouth address, TQ 148. They have a Teignmouth telephone number when we used to have telephone numbers that were down to towns. All things Teignmouth, but they technically live in the parish of Dawlish. We've burst our boundaries. We can't take any more. We may have a railway station, thank God, but we cannot take any more housing.
Okay. 10 is coastal towns, number 156, which has got the Langdon Business Park in it. I don't think anybody else wants to speak on that at the moment. So, right, rural towns is 11, pages 158 to 160. That's Bovey, Tracy and Chudley, isn't it? Anybody want to comment on that as being in the plan? No, we're all right on. Haven't seen any hands. No, right. Well, you're doing well here. So we're on to the final bit of the plan, which is villages, which are only taking, what is it, 12% of the houses, which is pages 162 to 175. And there'll be Councillor Patch on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to reference a comment from Michelle a short while ago about the constraints to development in Newton Abbot around floodplain issues and the risk of flooding. And just to note that one of the significant developments in Liverton does actually mention in the local plan the risk of flooding from the Liverton Brook. I'm not totally convinced, having seen the flooding in that area, what, 4 years ago, that is a robust site for housing. I'd just like to note that, and it will be interesting to see what comes back from the consultation, whether anybody looks at that more closely. I know that going back about, it was 3 or 4 years ago, there was a huge flooding in that area, including the main road, which will go past or very close to that development. So I just want to flag that really at this stage.
Okay, it was Councillor McGregor, wasn't it, over there?
Thank you, Chair. My ward's Bishop Stainton. The plan has 2 sites allocated, both of which are outside the settlement limit, so bursting out, to take Councillor Cox's point. Both sites present a highway safety issue for pedestrians and cyclists getting into the town. The proposed route from one of the sites was through Lawn End, which is the local park, but it still takes pedestrians onto narrow, unpaved roadways, and then out onto the road without pavements to walk on. So from that perspective, we still have a situation where we have 2 sites where highway safety is a concern. Now, one of the big things that I've noticed in planning, whenever we get a planning application coming to the planning committee, is that, it's allocated in the local plan, so therefore it must have been checked. Well, here we are sitting talking about 2 sites which I've highlighted have a highway safety issue, one of which was rejected for highway safety issues. Although it has to be said, the highway safety issue notation that the rejection had was actually not what was discussed at the committee meeting, which is very disappointing to find that out after the fact. The situation remains, we're talking about 2 sites with no increase in infrastructure being talked about beyond cycle paths and pavements, foot routes, but we're talking about foot routes that take people through a dangerous section of roadway, which is exactly the same problem that Baker's Yard was rejected on last year. Now, from my perspective, we shouldn't be putting sites onto the local plan where there is a highway safety issue, and where I was promised prior to this actual document that I would see alternative workups on opportunities to make those routes safe, and I have seen nothing so far. On that basis alone, I cannot back this local plan. I cannot vote for it. Thank you very much, Chair.
I'd like Officer to comment on that, if I may, over there. Try and answer it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. So in terms of the assessment of these sites, they have all been looked at by the highways officers at Devon County Council, and the infrastructure requirements that are included within the policy have been agreed with them. From their perspective, as the highway authority, these developments can be delivered in a safe and accessible way. In terms of Baker's Yard being refused previously on highway grounds, that is correct as I understand it. However, what the combination of the 2 sites enable is for Baker's Yard, which is a redundant brownfield site, to come forward, and Ford Lane, the other allocation, provides that safe pedestrian access route and facilitates safe pedestrian routes through from Baker's Yard to the rest of the village. In terms of when it comes out into the village and the lack of pavements, this is no different from many of the other villages that we've got in the district, but they have, you know, relatively low speed, low level traffic within those, and again these have been agreed with the Highway Authority. The work that Councillor McGregor has spoken about in terms of those pedestrian routes, I have responded to those in an email that he sent to Phil Shears, and responded on the basis of the update with those. And the concept plan has been updated to reflect those concerns and is provided in Appendix 2, I think. Appendix 5 of the plan, which is part of all your documentation today. So if you would like to see it, we probably can get it up on the screen, but it is there as part of the council documents, Appendix 5 to Appendix A. Apologies for the difficulties with navigating all of this, but there's a lot of information.
Councillor McGregor, you wanted to come back on the answer, didn't you?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of Baker's Yard was refused on the basis of Devon Highway's own advice. They objected to that particular plan coming through. Now, I appreciate that Michelle has mentioned that the combination of the sites, but that still presents us with taking people down away from the village in a circuitous route and then back up to the main road, which nobody's going to use. So there's going to be taking people out onto an unsafe highway. There is nowhere to stand out of the way when traffic is coming down that lane. That is the fact of the matter. And it's unlikely that on a single site review of Baker's Yard, which is likely to happen first anyway, because it is ready in terms of, you know, the work that needs to be done, that site can be approved. There is also no safe route for people coming out of Baker's Yard or Ford Lane site to arrive at a bus stop safely to Newton Abbot without walking a mile out of their way. And that is, again, another part of the refusal that should have been noted by the planning committee when the refusal of Baker's Yard was put through, but they failed to note that on the decision notice, which is actually very disappointing to see that actually excluded. And I'm sure Councillor Hayne will recall that that particular meeting, because he did narrow it down to the specifics around the highway safety. So I'm still at the position where I'm unable to support.
Yeah, I'm sure the officer will respond on that, and you've probably got a chance to comment on this in the consultation, haven't you? So we're getting it. Let's hear from Michelle. Thank you.
No, that's from me.
From Neil.
Yeah, so paragraph 12.14 on page 164 says that it's likely to be phased, that this Baker's Yard will come forward after Ford Lane. The other point I would make is that obviously Devon County have been consulted on all of the sites. They are supportive of the policies as set out, and the policies set out what needs to be in place to ensure that we're satisfied that it can be delivered and delivered safely. And so if a proposal comes forward that we consider doesn't meet that, then the policy allows us to refuse that. So that's the thing to be mindful of, is that the policy's drafted to take all of those concerns into account.
Right, thank you for the answer. I propose now that, oh, sorry, we'll hear from you, Richard, but I'm proposing a comfort break after that. Good point to stop for a relief.
Okay, yeah, I'll try and be brief on that basis. I propose to talk about the sort of villages as we're on that, but you did mention earlier that the working group had unanimity in terms of proposing this. I sat on the working group. I didn't back this local plan, so I just wanted that to be on record. That said, I did go on all the site visits and engage in the process, and engage with the parish councils as well. And I think it is reasonable to say that the villages' parish councils were listened to within this process. So that in itself is appreciated. I would take on board the point of Councillor Cox that Teignmouth is bursting at the seams. I think Newton Abbott's burst its seams already. So following up on Councillor McGregor's point, they are sustainable locations. They do have the railway stations, and it does seem rather odd that some councillors have got patches that aren't taking a great deal of development when they are sustainable locations. And I'd still reinforce that point that we should have been looking for the higher density locations nearer those train stations. Again, Councillor Gary Taylor made a very good point, slighting me slightly, that there was 150 units in the plan. 150 units and 750 per year doesn't really touch the sides. I think we're looking for sort of some sort of revolution on that front. It's disappointing that the coastal sustainable towns are not taking their fair share. Thank you.
Well, I'm just going to read out something very briefly and then break for a comfort break. In the forward introduction on this plan, in finding land for new development, we've all been guided by three main principles, taking all opportunities to use brownfield sites first, including redeveloping and regenerating town centres. Two, next ones with a dot, locating most of the new homes close to job services and sustainable transport. And three, finding smaller sites for housing in larger villages to sustain essential local facilities. So that might be, if you don't think that's quite right in some of what we're doing, the opportunity was there in the consultation, wasn't it, to point that out if you so wish. Now let's come back, if I may, close the meeting for a comfort break, and we'll come back a couple of minutes after 12 o'clock. My watch says 11:52, so I think we'll have 10 minutes off now. Maybe, is the canteen open over there, or for a coffee, or? I'm not starting the meeting. I just want to say they're knocking up a few sandwiches in the canteen. So for those that haven't got any lunch or could do with extra sandwiches, they are doing that sort of thing. We will break for lunch later on, close as 1 o'clock as we can get. So I just wanted to impart that information. Thank you. Couple of minutes, members, please. Right, members, we are going to break for lunch, so we can get back onto this. Thank you. Don't encourage them. All right, well, I'll see what I can do.
Certainly no more suggestions about changing it.
Okay. Right, are we live streaming?
We are.
We are, well done. Right, if we can keep going. So we've been through one of the recommendations. So 2, to approve the policies map Appendix B for at least a 6-week period of public consultation. Everybody want to comment on that one? 3, to approve the sustainability appraisal report Appendix C for at least 6-week period of public consultation.
Can send in a view about the plan, so that
I'm sure they can, but we'll have an officer answer on that
without fettering their discretion. I reckon Section 25 of the Localism Act 2011 covers them, but just to get that agreed, that town and parish councils can comment as corporate bodies.
We'll have officer comment on that, obviously. Neil or Michelle, the answer is yes, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
All right. Right, we're rattling along. I did read out 3. So 4 was approve the habitats regulations, Appendix D, for at least a 6-week period of public consultations. These are what's written down here. Approve 5, approve the draft community infrastructure levy, charging schedule Appendix C for at least a 6-week period of public consultation. No hands up for these. Obviously, note the content of the consultation statement for Part 1, 2 and 3 regulations, 18 consultations Appendix S. That's 6. Nobody wants to comment on that. 7 is note the content and conclusion of the equality impact assessment, Appendix G. And I'll read out 9 for the sake of it. The meeting, grant the delegated authority to the head of place and commercial services in consultation with the executive member for planning to make minor changes to items 1 to 6 prior to consultation to address any editorial errors and matters of clarification. And 9, following the consultation, submit the proposed submission local plan 2020 to 2040 and associated documents to the Secretary of State for the Department of Levelling Up, Housing and Communities to begin proceedings for public examination.
Chair, that was slightly amended by Councillor Taylor as well.
That was amended, wasn't it? There.
Yeah, there was an addition.
An addition, which is what's got to be read out there.
That's the additional wording that Councillor Taylor put forward on 9.
9. Well, I'm going to read it out. The additional wording that Councillor Taylor put forward on 9. This will include granting delegated authority to the head of place and commercial services in consultation with the executive member for planning and the chair of the local working group to recommend minor modifications to the inspector prior to submission, while any major modifications will be referred to full council. So where do I move to now? And this is it 10 now? Yeah, and 10 is the new. Oh, Councillor McGregor, you want to comment on that?
Thank you, Chair. It was just to ask that if any minor changes are made, that members are notified by email at least, just for openness and transparency's sake.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that all right?
Yeah, I mean, what we did last time was produce a schedule so you can see all of the changes, and we might have a track change document as well that just shows. So, yeah, any minor tweaks.
And microphone's still on, good. And recommendation 10, which is important, I think, this is probably the most important one of these, the ones that I've read out. Subject to the current proposed changes to the National Planning Policy Framework coming into effect, which relates specifically to housing requirements becoming advisory, the Council commits to undertake a review of the District Council's of the district, not count, they haven't got the word council, of the district's housing needs immediately following adoption of the 2040 local plan, which takes into account the forthcoming census-based household and population projection, and if a lower housing requirement is identified, proceed with an urgent partial review of the plan, which reflects a lower housing target. That is what is recommendation 10. Does anybody want to comment on that? And Councillor Andy Swain. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I imagine other people would want to comment on this. I do think it's fantastically important. I want to say I'm very grateful to the people that have worked hard to get this recommendation in place. The plan was prepared on the basis of numbers in the national formula, as we all know, and it was abruptly announced in November without any warning that that was now going to be optional. But at the same time, it's clear from the reports we've heard earlier that the law hadn't changed at that point, and everything is very much up in the air, which leaves us in a bit of a mess. But importantly, the numbers have always been mandatory, which means whether or not we agree with the numbers has never been a question for us because we don't have any choice. Now, apparently, we may have a choice, and I think it's important that we have the opportunity to make the most of that option, and that's why this amendment is really important for me. I would have struggled to vote through the plan if there was a risk of that fixing the numbers so that they could then become optional, but they wouldn't be optional for us because we'd already agreed to them. I hope that makes sense. I do have a question though. Now that the planning formula is up for debate, I'm interested more than I was previously in how it actually works. If my understanding is correct, the numbers in Teignbridge are higher than in many regions because, in effect, Teignbridge is an attractive place to live. People move in from other areas, bringing money with them, and that pushes the house prices up. Salaries in Teignbridge compared to other areas are generally low, which means that housing is relatively unaffordable in Teignbridge, and the standard formula applies an uplift to the number of houses required because houses are thought to be unaffordable. In general terms, how big is that uplift? To what extent is Teignbridge asked to build more houses than a comparable authority would be if there wasn't the perception of unaffordability? Thank you.
If I may, Chair?
Yes, Councillor Taylor and Councillor
Swain. In response to that question, and Councillor Swain makes a very good point about the calculation. It's quite fiendish looking, but it's in essence it's relatively simple. It takes the 2011 census data, which came out in 2014. It gives us a data set to look at, which looks year on year out into the near distance at expected household growth, and that provides what I would call sort of an underlying growth need. But then it takes a simple-ish calculation to which relies on the affordability of housing in the district. So that's a variable. That's why we were thinking we were going to be putting 760 houses a year into the local plan. It's now 741, and because the data sets have moved on, the affordability has gone up very slightly. I think it's 9.6 or there or thereabouts. And perhaps house prices at that point in time might have just come down a little bit. But that still means that we have to add 41%, an additional 41% on top of the census projections. Thank you, Chair.
Who was it next, Paul? Leader.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's very important. I suspect all councillors would agree with the view that we need the right number rather than just any number. And clearly the Secretary of State made an announcement before Christmas to say housing numbers are not mandatory, they're advisory. That's what was reported in the news, in all of the media. That's what most people have heard. But the reality is that the requirements on councils in making their local plan haven't actually changed. We are required to use the government standard formula, and that sets the number. think we are all very mindful, and I'm grateful for the help and support of officers to provide the wording for recommendation 10, which actually enables the council to go forward, assuming we agree to go into consultation today, to go forward with a robust plan that meets the government's current requirements, so we can go forward with confidence on that, but also gives the assurance that if, when government hold firm to their word and change their regulations, that we can then come back as a council and reassess that housing number if government do what they say they do. For me, in all of this, and not to revisit too much my last local plan, or the current local plan, which I voted against, we had a big argument in council about what the housing number were. And at that time, as I recall, there were several housing formula, and we spent some long time in council considering that. My view at the time was 500 a year would have been the right number. But actually, as Neil Blaney has said earlier today, when it went to assessment and the independent inspector reviewed it, a decision was made, and that's where we are. And consequently, we are where we are now because of government regulation. And I think all of us will understand the injustice that councils like Teignbridge are held to account for house building, when in fact we don't build houses. Okay, we have built, new affordable council houses, but we are not a house builder. And if a house builder decides to go slow because we are entering into a recession and they build less, what powers do we as a council have? Actually, this national position is about government requiring developers to build out and deliver. But I think we'd all recognise as well, one of the big issues in Teignbridge is affordability of housing. And there was an argument that the more you build, the cheaper they become. But actually, that's not true. It's not about the more you build, it's actually about recognising the problem nowadays for people is often invested on developers agreeing high land prices for the land they're building on. But also because I think actually, and many of us might well agree, but my view has always been that actually what we need to get back to is councils building council houses, modern, affordable council houses, and actually that would address so many issues that we face with over 1,200 people on our housing waiting list. Chairman, I'm going to vote in favour of the recommendations, both as set out and as amended recommendation 9 and 10, because I think it allows us to move forward to regulation 19, but it also gives us that precious option of reviewing this again when and if the government change the regulations. And I would ask all councillors to support the recommendations as set out in order to defend both district from predatory and unwarranted development, in order to meet the government's requirements, and to ensure that we have that backstop which recommendation 10 provides. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor McGregor.
Thank you again, Chair. Thank you for your comments, Councillor Connett. One of the points I made earlier was about whether the district would consider looking again, it was discussed in 2019, at the possibility of being an LDC, Local Development Corporation itself, which would enable it to develop land and build houses to meet local residents' needs, both in terms of affordability and social housing. It's something that perhaps we may need to consider for the future, maybe not right at this moment in time, but hopefully fellow members would agree that that would be a good plan, certainly as far as local residents' needs are concerned. Thank you.
Councillor Wrigley. Put your hand up, man.
Thank you. I can assure Councillor McGregor that we are doing everything we can to build as many council homes as we can. At the moment, there is no need for us to take that step, but should that be necessary in the future, I'm sure it's something we may well consider.
Right, we've had the recommendation proposed. Now's the time to vote on this, please, if I may. You've seen the recommendations here. We've read them all out, 1 to 10 included. So may I ask for a show of hands, please, of all those in favour of it? Yeah, will do. Against? How many? 4. And abstentions? 4 against. Right, so that is passed. Thank you very much indeed for the speed at which we got through it. I was dreading being here at 5 o'clock, but it looks as though we're going to be let off the hook, as it were. Right, we move to the next item on the agenda, if we can, please. Item 11 it is now, which is the recommendation from the Executive of the 3rd of January, notice of motion, lasting memorial to the late Queen Elizabeth II, acknowledges the ascension of King Charles III. All right, who's presenting this? Councillor Connett.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a motion put forward by Councillor Bullivant to ask Councillor Kane to Executive, and this is the Executive's recommendation to Council, which is to support the intent of planting 2 trees, funded by underspends from the Council's Community Fund, and if that isn't sufficient, then from savings elsewhere in this financial year, Chairman. And Councillor Bullivant will no doubt wish to speak to his motion, but that's for me just to simply introduce the Executive recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Cox.
Yeah, Councillor Cox wants to speak. Councillor Bullivant, please. Yes.
I'm grateful to the leader for and the Executive for recommending that the proposal moves ahead. Obviously, it's very rare that we have the opportunity to celebrate a monarch who's been on the throne for 70 years, and I think it's appropriate for the future generations of people of Teignbridge that they have something to which they can look back on and recognise the contribution that Her Majesty made to this country and community. And at the same time, recognising the accession of King Charles III is something that, again, we should recognise. So putting 2 trees together of a suitable design or suitable type within the grounds of Ford House is something that we should all be proud of. And I certainly welcome the support of the Executive and thank them for their recommendation that this should proceed. And I ask all fellow councillors to join with me and thank them and approve this investment on behalf of the people of Teignbridge. Thank you.
Councillor Cox.
I'd like to amend that I totally agree with everything except for the payment. It should be done by crowdfunding, and only council funds should be used if the crowdfunding proposal doesn't produce enough money. Why not let everybody in Teignbridge, all the people, scout troops, people, clubs, societies, individuals make a contribution to this so they can say they've done that, and we could perhaps provide them with a certificate to say they've contributed to this. Let the people of Teignbridge pay for this to show their love for our late Queen.
Councillor Connett before Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't support the amendment that Councillor Cox has put forward.
Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. Much has been made in this meeting so far of the cost of living crisis, the difficulties that the country faces going forward. I would rather every single spare penny of my councillor community fund was given to food banks or to perhaps add value to the council tax reduction scheme. We already have, as a council, a tree planting schedule. It wouldn't be too difficult to, within the current budget, divert that to include 2 trees for Ford Park. There is a whole range of trees from whips to saplings. It's all local, natural choices for the trees that are being planted, so there would be no difficulty in sourcing that. I don't want to see the community fund going to this project when in fact we're already planting trees. But thank you very much.
Leader.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just worth reminding ourselves that during COVID, we used Council's Community Fund to support the food banks. As a council, we support very well Citizen Advice, CVS, NACTA, for example, Newton Abbot Community Transport. In the council tax, we are probably one of 33 councils nationally that provide 100% council tax relief. In the budget coming forward for next year, while we are proposing a £5.54 a year increase, we are also proposing a £5.54 refund across the board. So this council is doing a lot to support families and people in Teignbridge through the cost of living crisis. I understand entirely what Councillor McGregor says, that there is, a good tree planting programme going on. I think Councillor Bullivant's motion was more about the specific issue of commemorating 70 years of service by Her Majesty the Queen, to mark that, but also the accession of King Charles III to the throne. The easiest way to actually fund that, so we shouldn't have unfunded propositions, was in the unspent Councillors Community Fund, which at the end of each year there is generally money left unspent. What I'd say to councillors is, if you are concerned about your money possibly being used to support these 2 trees, then get it spent in your area before the end of the programme, which is, I think, the season cuts off at the end of February because of the election purdah period. So get it spent. If you're not minded, if you don't worry about it, if you're happy to support it, then leave money in your Councillors Community Fund. But for some people, they won't spend it all, and that's the first call. And if that isn't sufficient, then we will find the money from other general savings within the Council's end-of-year resources for what effectively will be a quite modest amount, Chairman. I hope that reassures councillors that what we're trying to do here is acknowledge that there is widespread respect and regard for Her late Majesty, and it is just true trees we're planting, not a spare.
It's Councillor Linda Petherick next, and then Councillor McGregor.
I actually agree with Councillor McGregor about trying to use the funds that's already there. My concern about the community fund is, for example, I've got money in my fund. Some of it is not going to go out till March, so I'd hate to get to it closer to March to find it wasn't in there. If there is a limit and I've got to sort it before February, I will. But I just think that unless it's the money that's just not going to be spent, then that's a different matter. But some of us have got it committed but can't take it out till later.
Councillor Connett will clarify this.
Well, I can clarify. The Councillors Community Fund will close early this year in order to avoid the purdah period. So I think a date's been given in the members' newsletter. We will try and get that reissued, but I think it's around about the end of February. So I'd say to Councillor Petherick, get your money out before the end of February. When the scheme closes, what's left that hasn't been allocated by councillors, the first call will be towards the proposal that Councillor Bullivant's made for 2 trees. So I say to councillors, get the money spent. If you want it in your area, get it spent. What's left when the scheme closes at the end of February, or whatever date that is, will then go towards these trees. So you won't suddenly find that your money's gone. It will only be taken when the scheme closes.
I think that's made it clear. Councillor McGregor, you want to speak again?
Thank you, Chair. At the last meeting this was discussed. Councillor Swain quite rightly asked the question whether this was going to be compulsory, to which the answer was a resounding no. This looks like compulsory by the back door to me, and as such, I would like that to be noted that I do not wish any balance of the community fund to go to this particular project. I think it can be dealt with within the current tree planting schedule. I don't think it needs anything extra. I don't think we should be spending taxpayers' funds on this when there are much more needy cases within our own district requiring support. Thank you, Chair.
Hang on, Councillor Malone.
Hi, I have in the past been called an anarchist by Councillor Bullivant. I do in fact have nothing but fondness for the late Queen, and I have no problem with this as an idea, but I can't see how in the current climate we can take money from that would otherwise be going to clubs, societies, people who desperately need it right now, for something that really, I mean, for God's sake, how much does 2 trees cost? When I think about all the money that has been wasted by this council in the last 4 years on boom and bust projects and dodgy consultations, and now you're going to tell people that you can't afford 2 trees. If we want to put these trees in the ground, then let's just vote for the council to put the trees in the ground.
Right, Councillor Connett wants to come back on this.
Chairman, just to clarify, as I've said, if you want to use your councillors' community fund, use it, spend it, get it out in your area right now. when the scheme closes, as in you will not be able to allocate because the scheme is closed due to the election period, then any unspent monies, any unallocated monies will be used towards funding these trees. So I say to Councillor Malone, it's a perfectly valid question, spend the money. But what's left unspent will be used. So no one's robbing anyone of anything. No one's taking money that would have gone to a community group, because it's down to the councillors to get the money into their community groups. And if they don't do that, the underspend will be used.
Well, there's no amendment that's actually been put forward by anybody, but it's actually been seconded. So with that in mind, let's go to the vote on the original motion. All those in favour? Those against? Those abstaining? So the motion is carried. Thank you. Right, where are we now? No. It's the notice of motion. It's the motion. Notice of motion 12. All right. This is the Teignbridge Hospital notice of motion that's been put forward. Do we go to Councillor Cox to speak on the motion? We do.
Two-thirds vote.
Yes, understand that. Yeah.
Thank you. Standing up here. So I feel happy. No one can have missed what's happening to our NHS, and the Teignbridge Hospital motion is about a specific hospital, but it's about a system, and it's about saving Teignbridge Hospital, not for nostalgia, not to have Hattie Jakes as the matron and to go back to Carry On Doctor. And as I've been accused of being a Luddite, I'm not. It's for good, sound medical reasons that we want Teignbridge Hospital to be retained as a rehabilitation unit. It's a different to the use to what it was originally built for, but it's a continuous place to help people with medicine. And though we talk about nostalgia and people's sentiment and people, they are feelings of the heart. And if we keep Teignbridge Hospital open, we will have the League of Friends, we will have people who will volunteer and help the hospital because they'll see it as theirs. And of course it is theirs because the land was originally built before the NHS was bought by the people of Teignmouth, Shaldon and Bishop Stainton. And so I hope councillors will support, or the executive and council subsequently will support this motion, so I so move.
Thank you. Thank you for putting that motion forward. If I can say personally from the chair, I'd love to see this motion debated today and put to bed. Is there support in the council? I would like to propose from the chair that it's debated today, if I may. That's seconded for that. So can we have a vote that it... Oh, yeah, all right. We need to...
Chairman, we have very many members of the public from Teignmouth come this morning, and wisely and based on previous experience, we advised them that this may be a very long meeting. I don't think anyone perhaps expected that we be at this stage of the agenda right now. If we debate it right here and right now, those people have left and they won't hear that debate. And so I would respectfully suggest actually that we take it to executive, where those people may wish to come and they can contribute, but actually it will then come back to the next council where it will be on the agenda for a debate. And I think actually the debate may well be widened out by members from Teignmouth to talk about community hospitals and the valid part. And we hear in the NHS about the booking hotels to move people out from acute hospitals. So I think there is a debate to be had, but I would respectfully suggest it may appear a discourtesy to the residents of Teignmouth who came today and were advised that this may be a very long meeting and are left if we then proceeded to debate it all.
I hear what you're saying. It's Councillor McGregor would like to speak.
Thank you, Chair. As the person who seconded you on the matter of the debate, perhaps might need to get some screen wipes for Councillor Connett's glasses, because if he looks to his left and front, he'll see a very large screen which reflects what's being broadcast on YouTube currently and live streaming. There's a very large amount of camera locations around the room. I see myself on the screen there. And I'm sure that if anybody is in Teignmouth who wants to follow the debate, all they need to do is follow the live streaming. And I think it's a priority now that we discuss it now Delaying it by weeks and months simply pushes back the problem. And the reason I say that is that it's needed now is because the National Health Service and the government are already talking about purchasing care beds. Teignmouth Hospital is an existing location. It's ideal for anybody who wants to work in the care sector, who lives in Teignmouth, because there's limited travel costs for them, and it's not a well-paid sector to work in. And I think it's a really good opportunity for us to discuss it and debate it now. I can take the decision that the council or the motion to the board meeting on the 8th of February at Torbay NHS Trust, so that we can actually start talking about it there. So pushing it back is simply delaying that opportunity. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Dawes wants to speak, please.
I thought that when the members of the public came and this motion wasn't brought forward, that they were advised that they could go home and watch the debate on YouTube. So I would have thought that we'd be doing them a great disservice. They're taking time out of their day, their working days, probably people taking days off, to come and listen to something that they felt very strongly and passionately against. I would imagine they'd be quite disgruntled if we just kicked the can down the road and put it into another debate and ask them to take other days out of their time to follow something that goes through executive, then goes through another full council. I can't understand why we wouldn't debate it today.
Well, I've tabled the amendment, which has been seconded, which is before any debate or not takes place. We have to vote on whether there's 2/3 of the council would like to debate it. So would you raise your hands, please, if you want to see it debated today, please? Do an accurate.
1, 2. Oh, can we just put our hands up? Because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So, yeah, I've got you got it. Is that
You
what
got
you
me?
make it? Because 15 with you.
So has the motion to debate it today failed or not?
Yes. Yes.
The motion has failed, so it won't be debated today. It will go to the executive. Is it to the next executive meeting? Indeed.
Next executive.
So do we know when that is for the benefit of those watching on YouTube?
It's the 7th of February, and it'll be held here.
The 7th of February for those watching. Here at Buckland.
Held at Buckland, yes.
Here at Buckland. Thank you very much. That passes that particular one for now. So where are we going now? No motion over the page. It was the last item, is it? Councillor, question. Blimey, we can have lunch here after. All right, councillor, questions. Yes. Would you like to read out or draw us attention to the question?
Members were circulated with the councillor questions and responses. So it's Councillor Gordon Hook put his question and the response was circulated.
Right.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to note the clarification from the leader, and I thank him for his answer. I'm glad that there are no plans, nor have there ever been any plans, as suggested. Does the leader feel that those who mislead the public, and in so doing denigrate the council, should apologise? Does he anticipate such an apology?
Thank you, Chairman. I saw an article in one of the online news media talking about the virtual demolition today. I think there has been a lot of misinformation. I'm grateful to Councillor Gordon Hook for his question. I don't anticipate an apology, but yes, I do think they should. Thank you.
Okay.
There's no point.
Keep on the question. Clarification on what you're talking about?
I'm sorry. Well, there was a question tabled from Councillor Hook. You should have a copy of that, Councillor Malone. It said. Okay, let me just help, because it's not going to take a second to do. Can the leader clarify if there are or indeed ever have been any plans to demolish the Alexandra Cinema? In response from the leader, there have never been any plans to demolish the Alexandra Cinema. You heard a supplementary question and you heard the answer to that. Does that help you out?
In part, yes.
Okay.
Right. So
there's no debate or questions, I'm afraid.
Well, can I just ask that when members of the ruling executive want to make these statements, they actually name who they are talking about so that it's nice and clear for everyone.
It is clear.
And not, as they do in the news media, use snivelling, weaselly type expressions so that we all know who we're talking about, but they don't quite have the backbone to say it. Thank you.
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I mean, I have it there, Councillor Miller, I have there outlined the whole thing for you. So I hear what you say. I'm afraid I'm going on to the next question.
Demolish the interior. We've always said demolish.
All right. Well, right. The next.
Plans are in effect a demolition.
The next question from everything's been answered, and I've read it out. I read the answers out, so you heard all the replies. I'm reading out for the benefit of you of the next question. I'm reading the next question out, as your iPad isn't working. The next question is from Councillor David Cox. Question to the leader: will the leader provide an update on disposal of council-owned land in Teignmouth to the NHS for the planned new health and wellbeing centre? The response from the leader, as it reads out: the council remains in negotiations with the NHS regarding the disposal of land at Brunswick Street. I hope the matters can be concluded by the end of this financial year, with the receipt available in 23-24 to support the council's capital programme of investment across the district. I have asked officers to confirm with the NHS that they're able to proceed and report back to the council at the earliest opportunity if the planned transfer of the land for the Health and Wellbeing Centre has stalled for any reason. All right, Councillor Cox, do you have a supplementary question to that?
Just to say, are we going to put a deadline on the NHS? I mean, they've been dragging their feet over this. I think they want us to give it to them for nothing, but they're not going to get it for nothing. So are we going to put a deadline, or will we look to put a deadline?
I expect the leader will be able to answer your supplementary question.
Council would be aware that the matter was debated and decided by Council, and I've asked councillors to follow up with the NHS, and as soon as there's anything further to report, it will be reported.
Okay. Excuse me a minute. I'm in questions, Councillor Russell, and there's not...
It's just a statement of fact, Chairman. But,
you shouldn't be making a statement of fact. No, I'm not here. I'm awfully sorry. I'm not here. There's no provision and doesn't need anything for that. By all means, send an email out to all the councillors if you feel they want to know something. Right, question from Councillor Dawes. Question to the leader: given the police station is now open at Newton Abbot, is the leader assured that the residents of Teignbridge can be more confident that the rule of law will be applied in the district? The verbal response will be given from the leader.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm grateful to Councillor Dawes for the question. I'd like to first congratulate all those in the community, members of this council and particularly Newton Abbot Town Council, who campaigned for the reopening of Newton Abbot Police Station. I'm sure that within the community, within Newton Abbot, there is much relief and happiness that there is a police presence back at the police station, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan, for that response. We've gone through the business.
Supplementary, Chair.
Oh, supplementary, sorry. Is there supplementary yet?
Hi, yes, I've got a supplementary. At the last full council meeting, I asked for clarification from the monitoring officer on why I was disallowed to speak on the matter of the Alexandra Theatre, the theatre that in the Teignbridge plans was going to be demolished in terms of the interior. That clarification was supposed to be sent in writing to me and hasn't been. My understanding is that that advice was in breach of the law, Local Government Act. And also, the council brought forward a standards complaint against me in 2020, which my understanding is breached the law as well. So I'd like to know if the monitoring officer would provide that clarification or apologise. So I'd like the clarification in writing or an apology. And would the council seek to apologise for bringing unlawful standards complaint against me in 2020?
Councillor Conley.
Well, Chairman, it was a question to me, and the supplementary ought to be relevant to me.
Yes.
And the supplementary is not relevant. Thank you, Chairman. Okay.
Okay, that concludes the councillor's questions, and we're moving towards the end of the meeting. I'd just like to, I forgot in councillors' announcements to send my good wishes to Charles Nuttall, who wasn't well enough to attend it. Let's hope he gets better and makes a full recovery to good health, and I'm sure that's the wishes of this council to be done. But on a humorous note, if I have to get my spade out to plant the new 2 trees, I'll be very happy to see you all there. That concludes the meeting. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending.